Hey gearheads and musicians alike, Mark here with a new video talking about how I've been working on and building a new in-ear monitoring system. Now, I don't want to just tell you about what's in it and how I built it. I want to start at the very beginning and talk about why you may want to use an in-ear monitoring system for your live shows. I'm very much from the new school and a believer in using in-ears for live shows. This includes playing to a click track. In my case, I'm in two bands that use visuals that are synced to the music and have backing tracks with things like orchestral music, synth sound samples, so playing to a click is necessary. One added benefit to playing to a click track is that it forces the band to be tighter with each other. But anyway, in-ears are going to be necessary in a case like mine. However, if your band doesn't play to a click track, you can still benefit from using an in-ear monitoring system. For me, the biggest benefit to using an IEM system is that you'll protect your ears. You only get 2 ears in your lifetime, so you should be kind to them. Stages can get very loud, especially if you play high-energy music like rock or metal. Between drums, amps, and stage wedges, this all can pile up, and having in-ears can isolate that sound from your ears and give you full control over how loud they are. The second benefit is that you get a consistent mix no matter where you're standing on the stage. Now, using in-ears essentially eliminates the need for having to use stage wedges, and the less noise you have on stage means less chance for feedback. However, this shifts the responsibility of doing monitor mixing to the band and away from the front of house crew. They'll appreciate that they have one less thing to worry about, but this does shift a critical responsibility to you. If you plan ahead and come up with a quick to set up, consistent, error-resistant system, things will go smoothly for everyone, and you'll reap the benefits I mentioned earlier. Note that I'm not saying error-proof because we're all human beings and mistakes and unplanned things are going to happen. My goal with this build is to try to eliminate the possibility of things going wrong as much as possible, or that if they do go wrong, and they will, that the issues are minor and they can be easily addressed, worked around, or bypassed. As far as setup goes, you want to get on stage, get things plugged in, sound check, and play your show. This is a multi-stage, multi-step process, and it can be a lot to handle. Every second counts. Later on, I'll get more specific about how you can pre-patch your system as much as possible for better efficiency. Let's talk about consistency. Putting it simply, if you can set up your rack and gear by going through a physical or mental checklist every time, then you're golden. Make sure your band understands what's required of them in terms of what to plug into and where. But you're all in the same team and you should help each other if needed. And anything you can do to reduce the number of things you have to plug in will always help. To be error resistant, your best friend is going to be labeling. And I mean labeling everything. Inputs to snakes, cables, IEM transmitters, receivers, you name it. If you don't know what goes where, that's going to create confusion and the possibility of audio getting routed to the wrong place, like someone's IEM mix going to the wrong person, or worse, like your click track being heard by the audience. Color coding is also your friend. If you're trying to plug a green cable into a red port, then your eyes and brain are going to question you. Now let's talk about more specific requirements. Your mileage is going to vary depending on what your needs are, but I'll be building this rig based on my specific needs. First, this rig needs to be able to fly. I've played quite a handful of shows that require hopping on a plane to get to the show. As you can imagine, this can be very anxiety-inducing. The rig, including the case it flies in, must be under 70 pounds. Each airline can have varying weight restrictions, but rest assured, if you're over 70 pounds, you could be paying upwards of $100 to check the rig. My current rig, which uses this Fiasco 6U fly rack and polyproof case, weighs about 67 pounds. As I started planning my new rig, I meticulously documented the weights of every component that's going to go into the rack, making sure that when we add it all up, it stays under 70 pounds. Second, I need more channels. I'm basing this requirement on a show I played earlier this year where every channel on my stage mixer, the Behringer XR18, was used. This was between the instruments, including vocals, between 7 performers. This also included 3 backing tracks for a third guitar, voice samples, and an orchestra. Then there's the click track too. The XR18 handled this pretty well, but that left no headroom in terms of the number of channels left available. A possible trade-off is to consolidate those backing tracks down to 2 or even 1, but if this were the only limitation, I'd accept that trade-off and just keep using the old system. There are other limitations and requirements that my current system doesn't support, so I may as well address this problem by getting a mixer with 24 channels instead. Third, I need enough in-ear mixes. In the show with 7 performers, that meant 7 mixes. The drummer's mix can be wired since they're not moving around at all, so that leaves 6 wireless mixes for everyone else. That can be accomplished with 6 mono mixes between 3 wireless transmitters. I used these Shure PSM300s today, which have been great. These transmitters and receivers can eat into your budget, but I've used cheap budget systems before and have been the victim of constant dropouts and static. After playing many shows over the past few years, these units have never given me an issue and have a wide enough frequency range to work in busy environments where there's RF signals everywhere. They also support mono mixes so that you can get 2 per transmitter or 1 stereo mix. I personally haven't had an issue with mono mixes, so if you got everyone dialed in properly and have a click track that cuts through your mix nicely, you can get away with not having to buy more of these just so you get more stereo mixes. Not to mention all that extra gear costs more and takes up more space, and in my case, if we're going to stay under 70 pounds, we have to optimize both space and weight. The fourth requirement is to reduce cable runs as much as possible. In that show where we had 18 channels used, those cables were all over the place. Things like the mic cables, bass and guitars turned the stage into a bit of a rat's nest. Part of putting on a good show is being able to freely move around on stage, and having to worry about where you're stepping can be daunting. Fifth is to have a pre-gain mic level split between the stage mixer and front of house. A split is required because you need every signal on stage to both go to the stage mixer for everyone's in-ear mixes and for front of house. My XR18 has a pretty clean way to split the signals digitally by using the Ultranet port hooked into this active splitter. But this has introduced a couple issues. The split happens after gain is applied on each channel. This means if the gain on any of these inputs are changed, it affects the volume at front of house. This can be annoying to your front of house engineer if you're making minor changes, but disastrous if you're making big changes. Normally this can be dealt with by just tightly communicating with front of house, but this has also slowed down sound checks in quite a few instances because of all the compensation moves that the front of house engineer has to make. For my new system, I'd like this split to happen before the signals hit the mixer, meaning that any changes we make to those channels are completely independent of the front of house mix. 6 is that the rig should support recording of the tracks off the mixer. I love having multi-track recordings of our shows because you can use those for content online like social media and YouTube videos, live releases, and CD extras. It also gives your band a way to listen through what you could do better for the next show. Not every venue is going to give you these recordings, and I've come across cases where if a venue does give you a recording, tracks have been missing. So you can think of having your own recording as an insurance policy. Now we get to the fun stuff. Let's build out a new system based on these requirements. The mixer I chose was the PreSonus 24R. This will give us 6 more channels, but also 12 aux outs for in-ear mixes. I don't think we'll need that many, but it's good to have more than 6 at least. One advantage of this mixer is that it's only 2U, which is not a lot of space for a mixer that has this many channels. The XR18, by comparison, took up 3U. For in-ears, I'll be carrying over all the PSM 300s and this antenna combiner. Shure recommends you have a combiner if you have more than 2 transmitters. This also offers an additional advantage of being able to distribute all the DC power needed to the transmitters via one power cord. All of this takes up an additional 2U. Now here's where things get interesting. We have 2U left on the front, but what are we putting there? We need to address the other requirements, which means reducing cable runs and having an analog split. That's when I found out about the CAT system by Sound Tools. The system is a purely passive analog system that enables running XLR signals over Ethernet. Radial Engineering has a system called Catapult that's the same thing, but the CAT gear is lighter and takes up less space in terms of the depth of the rack, which is very important when I'm trying to stay under 70 pounds. Despite the system using Ethernet, it is not a digital system. The audio is sent over the 4 twisted pairs of wires in the Ethernet cable. Keep in mind that the Ethernet cable should be shielded so that not only interference is reduced, but they also can carry phantom power for things like condenser mics. So going forward, we're going to be thinking about grouping instruments and signals in groups of 4. The system is highly flexible and reduces cable runs because you can run one Ethernet cable for a group of 4 instruments. Here is a cat box with 4 female inputs. You could put 2 of these next to the drum kit and plug all the drum mics into it and run 2 Ethernet cables to the IEM rack. Anything else that would plug into the back of the stage, like a mic'd up guitar or bass amp, could be plugged in here too. For the front of the stage, you can use these boxes to plug in vocal mics or DI-based amp modelers, which in my case is a pedal board with a Line 6 HX stomp. So we've consolidated our cable runs into these Ethernet cables, but you need something on the receiving end of these signals. That's where these cat rack units come in. Note that the back has 6 Ethernet ports. 3 of them will receive signals from the cat boxes, but the other 3 are through ports. These through ports will split all signals for front of house, but let's come back to that. With 2 of these cat rack units, with 12 inputs each, that provides 24 channels, which matches the number of channels on the PreSonus mixer. So we'll mount these 2 cat rack units on the front, taking up the remaining 2U of rack space. Now, these rack units are receiving the signals, but that leaves the final step of plugging in some low-profile XLR cables between the rack units' outputs to the 24R's inputs. Now, just because we've taken up all the space on the front, that doesn't mean we can't mount things in the back. And we'll need to mount at least one more thing, because this gear needs power. The good news is that we only need 3 outlets, one for the antenna combiner, one for the 24R, and one for a wireless router. As I said earlier, the CAT system is completely passive, so the 2 rack units don't need power at all. So I'm going to use this Furman power strip to power the gear. Now this is a trade-off from my previous system, which uses this Furman power conditioner. Not only does the power conditioner take up space, it also weighs quite a bit, and things are getting pretty tight weight-wise at this point. By ditching the power conditioner, that does increase risk of having less protection against extreme voltage changes. However, I think these occurrences are rare, and while this power strip won't offer the same level of extreme voltage protection that a power conditioner does, it does provide some protection. To have something that takes up less space and weigh less, I'm going to go forward with this. Since we have the space, we can mount this power strip and the wireless router on top of the mixer by using some 3M dual lock. We are well on our way at this point, but again, quick to set up and consistency. We're supporting up to 24 channels over 6 Ethernet cables plus another 6 for the front of house split. This is starting to get unruly due to needing to reach the IEM rack to plug all of this in. What we could use now is a panel with all the connectors we need so that we can pre-patch all these cables, then all you have to do is plug things into the back. There's a company called Redco that makes made-to-order panels for use cases like this. So in this case, we'll have 6 Ethernet inputs for the 24R, 6 outputs for the front of house split, and some additional ports that I might use later. I even added this extra BNC connector because the antenna combiner has one BNC connector that's not used, so why not pre-patch that? So if we wanted to add another IEM unit, you can utilize the antenna combiner we already have by plugging it in right here. So we'll mount the Redco panel here at the top and plug everything in. To run our backing tracks, we're using a Focusrite 4i4. This gets hooked into a laptop which plays the backing tracks, visuals, and click tracks via DAW, which in my case is Reaper. Normally you would put this near your laptop and run TRS cables from the 4 outputs into your stage mixer, but in our case we need to send signal over Ethernet to our IEM rack. Luckily, CAT makes a TRS to Ethernet unit. Plug in the TRS cables and run an Ethercon cable to an available input port on the Redco unit and we're done. Now let's come back to the front of house split. I've never heard of a venue or event that will take Ethernet signals. Anyone should be able to support XLR cables, which is why I've been using this 16-channel XLR whip. But this thing is pretty heavy and a bear to carry in a suitcase. Well, it's Sound Tools to the rescue again because they have these Ethernet to XLR male breakout units. So we take some Ethercon cables, which should take more wear and tear than a regular Ethernet cable, loom them together, plug them into the CAT breakouts, and we essentially have the same exact thing, but it's modular and lighter. Finally, how do we record all the tracks for a live show? Luckily, that's easy. Plug into the USB port on the 24R with another laptop with a DAW on it, arm all the tracks for recording, then record. If all of your channels are gain staged properly, then you should have clean pre-fader tracks for all of your inputs. Alright, the rack is built. So let me walk you through it, first with what's on the front. And even though it does look like a lot, there really isn't much happening here. So first, the first 2 units of rack space here going from top to bottom are the Shure units along with the antenna combiner. Next is the Sound Tools Ethernet receivers. So these receive all of the signals coming from on stage and then sends all of those signals via these XLR cables, these low profile XLR cables, to every single channel on the PreSonus 24R. And all of these colors for the low profile XLR cables don't really mean anything. This is just what was available. So like I said, it does look like a lot. It really isn't much, but the real magic is what's happening on the back. So I'm going to turn this around and show you what's going on there. Now for the back, let's talk through what's happening from top to bottom. First is the Redco unit. So we have 6 Ethernet inputs. So that accepts all of the signals coming in from on stage from things like this. And the only thing I have plugged into here right now is this microphone. So that accepts all the inputs. Then the next 6 Ethernet ports there are outputs, so that handles the split to front of house. And then we have the little tiny router there. It just has 1 port, which is plugged into the control network port of the PreSonus, which allows us to remotely control via Wi-Fi everyone's individual IEM mixes. And you can see here that I'm trying to use right angle cables as much as I possibly can for space consideration. So we have a right angle power cable here, right angle USB cable, which goes into this laptop, which is recording this voice audio right now, as well as would record all of the audio on stage. So we get multi-stem recordings of every performance. And finally, we have these right angle TRS cables, which go into the back of all of the IEM units, and I have them zip tied off to the side there just for some better cable management. So next, we're going to hook this thing up to a mixer, which would emulate a front of house environment to make sure that the splits are working. And we'll test some other things just to make sure that we're good to go. And we are good to go. But the real test is playing an actual show on this rig. My band Premium Vintage played a show in Baltimore recently, and the system worked perfectly. The audio that you're hearing is a mix of our live performance created from the multi-track stems that are recorded right off the PreSonus mixer. And that brings us to the end of the video. I obsess over gear and technical stuff, and this was the most amount of research and planning I've ever done, and I wanted to share with everyone how I got here. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you out there for the next show.